Hey y'all, hi. Okay. The Kibbe system. People are so obsessed with it. I'm always getting recommended videos about it on YouTube. It's always coming up in the comment section of my style and fashion videos. People are always telling me what they think my Kibbe type is, and if I would only buy into the system, I would understand things better. Here's the thing. I've been down the rabbit hole and my feelings are mixed. So today I want to talk about it, what the Kibbe system is, my impressions, and my own personal journey. Let's get into the meat of the video. So what is the Kibbe system? It is a method of self-analysis to help people figure out which clothes will suit them best, which is done through identification with preset style archetypes and visual identities. So there are these 10 identities based on the proportions and vibes of your body, and based on which of those identities matches you the best, the Kibbe system has suggestions for what you should wear. David Kibbe is a stylist who started publishing his ideas in the 1980s, but the system he created has evolved over time. And I would say it has evolved in two ways, like into two branches. So one of the branches of evolution is that Kibbe himself has made official changes to the original system. So there used to be 13 categories and now there are only 10. I believe there used to be a lot of talk about which facial features typically aligned with which of the archetypes, but now, according to Kibbe, it's strictly about the lines of the body. So there's what Kibbe said then, and then there's what Kibbe says now. And at the same time, the system has taken on a life of its own on social media. And as you probably have noticed, it has recently had a revival. The internet is awash in Kibbe system information. TikToks, blog posts, Reddit forums, whole YouTube channels dedicated to it. And in the hands and the mouths of the people creating this content, the Kibbe system has become sort of codified online in some ways that align with the other branch of evolution, like in some ways that align with what Kibbe says now, and in some ways that don't. The rangy and inconsistent internet spawn of Kibbe is its own branch, I feel, of the system's evolution. And frankly, it can be a bit difficult to disentangle the two branches. I have read David Kibbe's most recent book, very recently published. It's called David Kibbe's Power of Style, which I presume is a pretty up-to-the-minute reflection of his current thinking. And I've also seen a recent interview with him by the lovely content creator Gabrielle Arruda. I will link that below. So in this video, I am doing my best to react to the work of David Kibbe based on recent information. I guess out of a sense of fairness and wanting to respect the fact that he has updated and evolved his original system over time. But the system really has taken on a life of its own on social media. And that life is also real, and that's also in my head. And I think that the fineness and blurriness of the line between his own clarifying of what he's saying and what other people seem to think he's saying is a defining aspect of the Kibbe system overall and how we experience it as style lovers in the age of information. And I will explain why that is before the end of the video. So before I get into a brief overview of the Kibbe system and start picking it apart, I feel so lucky today to be working with a sponsor that I really love, and that is Trainwell. For a person who makes videos about style on YouTube, loves clothes as much as I do, and relishes the adornment of the body as much as I do, I've struggled a lot over my lifetime to take consistent care of my body, especially now as the parent of a toddler. But I've been using Trainwell for 8 months now. 8 months! And it has done what I thought was the impossible. Gotten me to exercise consistently, and more importantly, gotten me to return to exercise really quickly even after I've gotten off schedule. Trainwell is a remote personal training service. It's a personal trainer in an app. When I first signed up last winter, I was starting from absolutely zero exercise, and I was feeling really overwhelmed by the challenge of figuring out how to fit regular exercise into my day. But I got on the call with my trainer, Chris, and she really listened to me, and she created a workout plan that is actually realistic and totally opened the door. All I had to do was step through. My favorite thing about Trainwell is how how easy it makes exercise. There is essentially no barrier to the workout. I like to get on some workout clothes most of the time, but sometimes I don't. And even on a really low energy day, I can still get myself to show up for it for trainwell. For me, at this moment in my life, it's not some sort of supercharged, spectacular, full body transformation. It's consistent, approachable, doable, just movement. And it's energy boosting, sleep improving, mood improving, stabilizing, strengthening. I don't feel like I've been on a challenging fitness path these past 8 months, and fitness has not been the focus of my life. But I truly hate to think of how I would have felt and what my life would have been like over these past 8 months without Chris and without trainwell and without the workouts that I've been doing. And the other thing is, when I first talked about trainwell on my channel at the end of last year, I had an unbroken streak and I was so proud of it. And that streak went on. I got past 100 days unbroken streak. And then shortly after that, my sister had a baby and life got really busy. My streak broke. I was heartbroken, but only for a short time, because then I was like, Chris is still there. She's still putting workouts together for me and checking in on me and waiting for me to pick up the ball again. So I just started over. Day one, after getting to 100, I started over at day one and I started building a new streak. That has happened a couple times, once because of travel and another time because of illness. Every time it's gotten easier to start again. So now, more than half a year later, I see that the real value is the support that I need to keep going back. And the real consistency, the ultimate consistency, is not never missing a day, but having the chops to go back and start over after you get off track and like miss a week. Using trainwell for so many months and through so many life events, that has ended up being its biggest contribution to my life. Not just the short-term accountability for self-care, but the long-term steady support. So take the quiz to find your perfect trainer, and you can get 14 free days of training through my link. You can go through the QR code on the screen or through the link at the top of the description box down below. And here is a brief overview of the Kibbe system. So the main language of the Kibbe system, the meat of the system, if you will, has to do with the dual nature of human energy. I mean, not to sound grandiose, but this literally is the marrow of Kibbe. The idea that some energies in the universe are bold, hot, angular, hard, fast, bright, and other energies are gentle, soft, curved, cool, mysterious, and patient. This is an ancient observation, of course. Chinese philosophy labeled this duality the yin-yang. Yin being the soft, cool, patient energy, and yang being the hard, hot, driving energy. And we see it everywhere in nature, including human nature. I had the pleasure and privilege of learning early in my life, as part of my study of Argentine tango, two important things about the yin and the yang in human nature. One, these energies are equally powerful, and equally meaningful. And two, everyone contains both of these energies. So yin and yang traits are uncoupled from gender identity, even though we sometimes use the words masculine and feminine to talk about the traits. Both energies exist at various strengths within everyone of every gender identity. One of the things I like about the Kibbe system is that it essentially, if somewhat passively, acknowledges this. We'll dig deeper in a moment. But here are the 5 main energetic categories of Kibbe: dramatic, natural, classic, gamine, and romantic. And these are on a spectrum from the most yang, the dramatic, to the most yin, romantic. The Kibbe resources that I've seen, and this is one of the things that I don't like about the system, all use cis women as examples for these categories. So yes, I like that Kibbe doesn't consider strong yang traits in the body to be something that doesn't suit a woman. Yang energy is simply something that gives anyone's physical presence a dramatic quality. And I find that most of the language in most places is fairly neutral. Like, it's not branded onto the system that it is only for people who identify as women. And around the internet, here and there, I've seen discussions popping up of the application of Kibbe to people who aren't cis cis women. However, from what I've seen, and I haven't seen everything, but from what I've seen, it's not actively inclusive. Like, I would love to see more Kibbe resources featuring non-binary and masc bodies and differently abled bodies. And again, we'll go deeper on that in a few minutes. So here we have this 5-point spectrum between romantic and dramatic. But the reason the Kibbe system is so complicated is that it's not this simple according to the system. You're not just 15% yin, 85% yang, and so you're this one of the 5, or 75-25, and so you're this one. No, according to the system, everyone falls into one of these 5 archetype groups, but then there are subgroups that emerge because the addition of the less dominant energy for your group can interact with your dominant energy in various ways. So according to Kibbe, if you're a gamine person, which is more on the yin end of the spectrum, you of course have some yang qualities, and those qualities might emerge in a saucy, playful way, which Kibbe calls soft gamine. Or your yang qualities might emerge in like a brassier, bolder way, which Kibbe calls flamboyant gamine. Speaking a bit generally here, because the system isn't totally symmetrical and it has changed over the years, but generally it's the variations on the way in which yang energy emerges from an essentially yin person and yin energy emerges from an essentially yang person that account for the somewhat overwhelming 10 different image identities. On the level of the overview, here are some things maybe to like about the Kibbe system. A strong emphasis on the individual yin-yang energy of a person. It leaves the door open for inclusivity, although I think it could do much more. It can apply to anyone of any size, and that is codified in the system, though most of the examples that I've seen are still pretty straight-sized. But size is addressed, and there is provision for it and a real attempt at inclusivity there. In theory, it's not really about your body type, but about the way that your yin and yang energies are balanced and work with each other. And as a theory, I like that. I find that a much more inspiring foundation for a discussion about style than just like, I have an apple-shaped body, so I can't wear X. If you really read the book, right? If you read the book over and over again, there is emphasis on how the system is not proscriptive. It's not about types, but rather about forging your own unique image identity. It's not about fitting yourself into a box, but rather about using the tools to access your own creativity and self-expression better. And the spirit of this, I like. The book literally says there are no types. The groupings are just general outlines to give you focus and attention. Kibbe says in this book, and I quote, "Instead of asking, what is my type? Start by asking, how can I learn to see myself through loving eyes?" That sounds great to me. And the overall thrust of the system has to do with embracing your own unique outline and your own energies and working with them to build a personal style instead of trying to kind of counteract or downplay them. From what I can tell, this is the thing that people love the most about Kibbe. People feel empowered by the permission to stop trying to wear a bunch of things that other people are wearing and looking good in, and just wear what Kibbe says is ideal for their own fairly specific image identity. I can see how that would be freeing. So reading about the method, and according to many sentences and paragraphs and declarations in this book, there's all of this open-mindedness, fluidity, room for individuality, and apparent rejection of conventional styling standards. However, there are two, I would say, sort of big questions for me, big complex questions about the Kibbe system that are the things that I think hold me back from embracing it wholeheartedly. The first one of those I have been calling to myself, actions speak louder than words. So there's all of this purported fluidity and room for individuality. But when you get into the nitty-gritty of Kibbe, the actual archetypes and image identities on the table, the labels and recommendations, it just really, really feels like the opposite of that. Everywhere you look, there are hard lines in the sand, caps on who can and can't be what, rigid declarations and definitions about what certain shapes of people must and must not wear. Online, trying to figure this out, it's the worst. Tests and sites claim that soft classics all have symmetrically evenly spaced features. If you're a theatrical romantic, then you have soft, fleshy arms. If you take a random Kibbe test online, it'll be like, how far apart are your eyes? How angular is your jaw? How high up are your breasts? Like chopping you up into incredibly tiny pieces, rating each piece and sort of sticking them back together to figure out your type. Admittedly, in the new book by Kibbe himself, there is no mention of facial features like lip fullness or even cheekbones, jawline, etc., with relation to the archetypes and identities. It's only about the overall lines of the body and how they relate to each other. So proportions within one person's frame, which is good because my experience with the extremely rigid and detailed parsing of like individual features and assigning them to certain types, which is what the internet sometimes seems to think comprises the Kibbe system, a lot of people just don't fit into that. And it's troubling. It's creepy. It makes me feel weird. The broader strokes of this new book are much more accommodating. And of course, some online Kibbe guides are really on board with the project of fluidity and have really heard what Kibbe is trying to say about leaving room for your individuality and your own intuition. So I have a quote from Gabrielle Arruda, who's done a lot of work on Kibbe on her blog. Please do not obsess over any one trait you have if they do not line up. These are just possibilities. And ultimately, you need to look at your body holistically and see the overall yin-yang balance, not one individual trait. Kibbe says very similar things to that in this book. So that feels a little friendlier. However, the book is still full of super rigid language, like suggestions for outfit silhouettes for the flamboyant gamine. You need an outline that includes two things, a base and details on top of the base. Or for the dramatic classic, you need a clean, smooth outline with tailored edges. Really specific, strict, dictatorial feeling recommendations. Another example of, I think, extreme rigidity, extreme and bizarre rigidity. If you're over the height of 5'6", you can only be one of 3 types. That seems so arbitrary and I don't know, like unscientific to me. Like, is it not possible that someone could be 5'7" or even 5'6.5" and have the balanced traits of the soft classic instead of one of the 3 more extreme combinations on the end? I just don't believe that. Like, millions of people in the world are taller than 5'6". Maybe if the claim was that rarely is a tall person a classic, it would be more stomachable. But never? Like never ever? To claim that, you would literally have to be a statistician who's done a huge amount of data gathering and number crunching. To my knowledge, that isn't part of what went into the creation of this system and the writing of this book. And those are just a couple of examples. As far as I can tell, the system has aspirations to accommodate the individual, celebrate everyone, allow for creative freedom, to hand people a styling tool that really deals with their energies and their spirit and doesn't like categorize people strictly into boxes based on something as mundane as what the rest of the world calls body type. But at the same time, the actual text declares that there are specific styling methods that are empirically and non-negotiably the only good choices for certain people based on what their body is shaped like. And of course, it's this second thing, this parsing and dictating and boxing in and rule making that the internet loves. Because the internet loves black and white thinking and really struggles with gray areas. I think the Kibbe system may have come from a place of appreciation for gray areas and a desire to retain the mystery and like keep the elbow room for uniqueness. But the ideas as presented, when drawn through to their natural conclusions, they become black and white as they solidify. It's that rigid systemizing and structure, the claim that everyone fits into one of these types and that the types dictate what you should wear, that made it trend wildly and has become the most recognizable aspect of Kibbe. So I feel like the Kibbe system talks a holistic talk, but walks an atomistic walk. And the actions speak louder than the words. It does that on a granular level. That's my first issue. Issue number 2, what I'm going to unpack next, is kind of like the way that the system does that on a philosophical level as well. So discussion point number 2, I'm calling the conflation of exterior and interior. I love anything that deals in yin and yang. I love the acknowledgement that everybody contains both, just in different amounts and different mixes. But, and hear me out, the Kibbe system seems to intimate that the balance of a person's yin and yang energies is inextricably tied to the shape of their body. I'm going to say it again. The system seems to intimate that the balance of a person's yin and yang energies is inextricably tied to the shape of their body. And that might sound maybe obvious or like a given, but when you really think about it, that's an intense philosophical claim. Like, without saying this super directly, the system seems to indicate that everyone on Earth who is proportionally similar to, say, Winona Ryder, a soft gamine, that all of those people have dominant yin energy and that their yang energy emerges specifically in a saucy and playful way. But that has to do with, I'd say, your personality and your spirit. And not all Winona Ryder shaped people have the same or even similar personalities, spirits, do they? I just can't help but feel like some Winona Ryder shaped people have Tilda Swinton spirits. And those people are gonna need the freedom to dress like Tilda. Now, having read the book, I think that, I don't know, a Kibbe expert or a Kibbe champion might respond to this concern by saying that the system is specifically dealing with a person's aesthetic energy. So a champion of the Kibbe system might say that a shape's visual effect is empirical in a way. A square is square and a circle is round. Each of those shapes projects a different energy. So he's not saying that all soft gamines have the same personality, but he is saying that all soft gamines have a shape that emanates a similar visual effect in the way that a piece of broccoli gives off a different vibe from a Brussels sprout. And if you're a soft gamine, you can choose, if you want to lean into the natural kind of energetic emanations of your shape, understand what your physical body projects, and work with that as you're getting dressed. And then your personality will be whatever it is, but the visual projection that comes from what you're wearing will be aligned with the visual projection that comes from the physical body that you happen to be in inside of this lifetime. Again, this is what I think a Kibbe devotee might say. So essentially, if you identify with Tilda Swinton personally, but you have a soft gamine shape, then the visual impact of you, the energies that emanate from you, are just not going to be the same as those that emanate from Tilda Swinton. And my understanding is that according to Kibbe's philosophy, that's not a bad thing. Everyone is totally unique, and the system is trying to help you put together a plan with what you do have, both inside and out. So if you want to work with the system, you'd say, well, what are the recommendations for a soft gamine that work with my Tilda Swinton soul? And presumably, you would be able to find something. I think that might be the disambiguation that a Kibbe champion might make, although probably with different language and not mentioning Brussels sprouts. But even allowing for that distinction, what it does is it provokes for me deeper questions about the alignment of one's inner self with one's exterior. And it begs the question, if you feel as though you are on the inside somebody who doesn't align with what you are on the outside, if you feel like Tilda trapped in a Winona body, should you just acquiesce internally to the way you look on the outside and kind of give up on your Tilda spirit? Parts of the Kibbe system, depending on how you read them, really do seem to suggest this. Like, your body is shaped very yin, so you just need to accept that you have to wear draping, clinging dresses that accentuate your curves. You shouldn't try to make yourself into Tilda Swinton on the outside if you actually look like Winona Ryder on the outside. Your style should reflect the visual vibe that your body has, because that is just how you are supposed to be. You are who you're supposed to be is literally in giant letters in the book. And I just don't know about that, y'all. It's like a magic eye picture. Like, if you look at that, this statement, you are who you're supposed to be with regards to the physical body, if you look at it from one angle, it's encouraging people to accept themselves and love their bodies. But shift the perspective slightly, and it's like, what about trans people? Like, what about the miraculous gift to humanity that is every single trans person? The system might not intend this, but the emphasis on embracing the mainstream aesthetic that corresponds with your natural body shape, it makes me wonder if theoretically on the surface, the system is open to being used by all genders and has the fluidity for that. But if underneath, on a philosophical level, maybe it's doing something that a lot of aesthetic systems sadly do, which is training us not to expect transness and not to really lean into that which is non-binary. And it's potentially including a lot of people, not just non-binary people and trans people, but it also excludes a whole bunch of other people who feel like they have a spark on the inside that in some way defies what mainstream Western fashion culture would prescribe as the most flattering thing for their physical body. It's like, where does power come from in fashion? For some people, it comes from really aligning your fashion choices with the mainstream ideals for the shape that you have. So they really sing together in most people's eyes. And it's like, wow, you walk into the space and you have this impact and you have this ease. And I think that that is what the Kibbe system wants for you. And I think that it helps a lot of people achieve that. But I think that power in fashion can also come from rejecting those ideals and just wearing the oversized blazer or whatever it is. You don't have to look good in the same way as the famous people who came before you who had a shape that's pretty similar to yours in order to be empowered by your clothes. You don't even have to be conventionally flattered by your clothes in order to be empowered by your clothes. It's complex though, because a lot of people are empowered by being conventionally flattered by their clothes. And for some people, it is as simple as just not knowing at all what is going to make them feel good. And they're not that picky and they don't have an eye and they need help. And if some system or book or online quiz or group of images or set of recommendations can, just help them along, help them choose a short jacket instead of the long jacket or the flared pants instead of the skinny pants. That can, totally change the way that you move through the world. And that can be literally life-changing. And I do support that. And I could totally see the Kibbe system having that kind of application for a variety of gender identities, especially for femme people, because that's kind of what has inspired the system so far. So for example, if you're a tall, angular person, no matter your gender identity or your sex assigned at birth, and you're at sea about what to wear, like maybe you are really leaning into wearing very femme clothes for the first time in your life. If you want to pull hard on like the strings of the fashion zeitgeist and its underpinnings of the old Hollywood studio system, like the paradigms of silhouette and energy that old Hollywood created and that are still sort of lurking and exist in most people's subconscious. If you want to access that, if you want to optimize based on that, then the Kibbe system could be a revelation to you. It could give you an amazing level of guidance and potentially condense years of experimentation and trial and error into just one afternoon of reading. So again, the applications are potentially inclusive and life-giving. I have enjoyed delving into this because the questions that it has caused me to ask are at the deepest level of inquiry about the value of fashion at all. It really raises questions about what style is for, what fashion is even for. And I think perhaps the cause of my friction with Kibbe is that the system's understanding of what fashion is for, like the use value of fashion, is simply not as comprehensive as what I currently believe the use value of fashion is. Meaning that the Kibbe framework is really about looking good in a certain way. And even though it's couched in this wonderful language of bringing your identity to life and allowing your inner self to shine through, there isn't really a provision in Kibbe for your inner self to shine through so powerfully that it overwrites what society expects from someone who looks like you. I think that Kibbe believes that your inner self should shine through, but that it will definitely end up aligning with what society expects from someone who looks like you physically. And that is where our opinions and our understandings of human nature and the human spirit and the human body diverge. Because it's like on any given day, I could look so many people straight in the eye and be like, I don't particularly want to look good to you. Like, I don't want to choose the clothes that will make me look like your ideal version of me. I even feel that way sometimes about my own husband. He doesn't really like bangs, and I just got them. I've gotten so many unflattering haircuts over the years, or like less than ideally flattering haircuts, just because they made me feel fierce and energized, and I just didn't particularly care that I would have looked more beautiful if I had left it long. It's like, to who? I look the most beautiful, I think when I like have that energy according to the definition of beauty that I care the most about. And I just think that for some people, there are so many items of clothing outside of your Kibbe suggestions for your shape that are going to be the items of clothing that will give you that energy. And, you know, the Kibbe system, the talk of it, the ideals of it probably do kind of align with what I just said. Because reading between the lines, there's such a passionate desire to have people experience that energy and that actualization. But remember what I said at the beginning about the very fine line between the holistic intentions of the system as it's written and the confusing monster of rigidity that it has become on social media. That's what makes the Kibbe system such a house of mirrors when you start looking into it. It's almost like the system itself has developed a yin side and a yang side. On the one hand, there's the gentle, patient, spacious, accommodating yin messaging that says that you should start by asking how you can see yourself through loving eyes. And on the other hand, there's this rigid, structured, punishing information blast of categories and rules that say that if you're a theatrical romantic, then your curves need to always be evident. So maybe the best advice to anyone wanting to engage with a Kibbe system is to choose the balance of Kibbe yin and Kibbe yang that you want to entertain. Some people want to be pummeled with an information blast of categories and told exactly what to wear and what not to wear. Other people need true spaciousness, room to defy what other people expect of their bodies, room to defy the pressure to wear what's flattering, maybe room to decide that you definitely feel your best when you're dressed as a Kibbe romantic, even though you're 6 feet tall and Kibbe says that all romantics are short. You know your own joy better than any system or any man. And it might be that someone can dally with the Kibbe system, enjoy it, learn a lot from it, and then realize that your particular combination of spirit and shape just don't fit neatly into it. So in a way, in that case, you're drinking a concoction that's like 90% Kibbe yin and only 10% Kibbe yang. Okay, we're here at the end. We're getting really meta. I feel like I don't have that much time to tell you about my own personal journey with Kibbe, like with my own body and my own style. For the Kibbe aficionados out there, I won't leave you hanging. The short story is that I am a mix of a lot of pretty balanced qualities that make it kind of hard to know. So a lot of the online tests, when I take them, they say that I'm one of the classic types, like balanced, but I'm 5'9", so that's impossible. Of the 3 tall identities, I'm closest to flamboyant natural. This camera angle is very distorting, but when it's just like neutral and I'm standing up straight, I have relatively significant width in my shoulders compared to the rest of my body. However, I'm definitely a curvy, fleshy person. And throughout my life, there have been times that I've leaned into soft, dramatic styling and found that it works pretty well for me. I feel like I do sort of have that soft, dramatic diva side that I reach for once in a while. So it's a hybrid, which isn't really allowed. I'm a flamboyant natural. But the thing is, for a lot of my clothes, I care more about like the fantasy of the garment, the feeling of it, the vibe of it, the texture of it, and the sensation of wearing it. I care more about that than I do about whether it is the most flattering choice for me in the eyes of other people. I think fashion is something more than the gaze of others. So the question of whether I'm a soft dramatic or a flamboyant natural, it doesn't really hold that much allure for me when I'm really kind of studying it and trying to figure it out. It's like the more I look into it, the more granular the question becomes and the less I care. You know, I'll talk more about that in another video if you want to. I could do a really self-centered video about the Kibbe system and me, but only if there is a true hue and cry in the comments for that. So let me know if it's something you'd want to see. So that's it. Not by any means comprehensive. I mean, I feel like if I learned anything, it's that I could probably, if I wanted to, and I do kind of want to, like write a 150-page academic paper about Kibbe and gender theory, maybe. So not comprehensive, but just my initial broad strokes reaction to the absolute warren. It's not just a rabbit hole, y'all. You go down the rabbit hole and you find an absolute warren of ever-changing information about the Kibbe system. Thank you for spending what probably turned out, even after editing, to be quite a long time with me. Thanks again to Trainwell for the sponsorship. And again, take the quiz to find your perfect trainer and get 14 free days of training if you go through my link. You can click on the QR code on the screen or the link at the top of the description box down below. Subscribe if you want to, and don't forget to take extra good care of yourself so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.